Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with two very special guests. Our first guest today is Danielle Ledezma, and she's here to share with us her new novel, Izzy in El Mareo. Now, Danielle grew up in San Antonio, Texas, and later moved to Austin, where she attended and graduated from the University of Texas with a BS in Public Relations and a concentration in Spanish. After graduating, she moved to Houston for a job in the hospitality industry when an opportunity arose for an exciting new career move to tropical Mexico, and she jumped on it. So let's welcome to the show, Danielle Ledezma.
Hi, thank you. It's great to be here.
What a joy it is to have you here and to talk about this book. Man, once I picked it up, I could not put it down. You just have to be so thrilled as an author.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I mean, this definitely started as just a labor of love. I never imagined that I would be holding in my hands this beautiful cover and this beautiful novel. It's just been such a ride and so much fun.
Well, and I know that it's getting some great reviews. And and before we get too far down the road, I always love asking people about inspiration. So what was your inspiration for this book?
Well, I did in my mid-20s take a job in Mexico. So a lot of the stories come from stories I heard while I was living there, or they're resembling something that I might have experienced. But it definitely was birthed first out of just journaling what I was seeing, what I was experiencing. I wanted to capture that time because I knew going in how special it was to do something like that. And I just wanted to remember and be able to look back, someday when I'm, married with kids and be able to tell them what it was like tangibly. So I just started, doing journals while I was down there. And some of the stories were just people wouldn't believe, like, that doesn't happen. And so I kept being told, you've got to write a book about this. This is crazy stuff. So I finally did. My husband said, you've got to sit down and just write it. We'll make the time. And I just kind of started, coffee shops on a Saturday here and there, and years later, here we are with this, hundreds of pages put together in sentences and paragraphs. It's amazing.
Well, I think so many people can relate to your book because the main character, Izzy, she goes through a lot of things that as women and just as travelers and people that we go through. I know you touch on, self-image. And I would love for you to share why you felt that was important, an important topic to address in this book.
Absolutely. I think that all people, not just young girls, but all of us in that age where you've left school, there's not as much structure. You're trying to figure out, okay, how do I fit into this great big world now? And who am I really when I'm removed from maybe the group of people or the organization or the things I associated myself with. And I think all of us go through it at different stages and different times in our lives. But that 20-something really is, for a lot of us, a turning point. And for myself, I had this weight that I couldn't identify, but it manifested in ways that were very interesting. As you read through the book, Izzy, in her story, it manifests in her relationships, both with women and with men, and with her parents. And so I felt that it was really important because we all need to remember or to know that we're not the only ones feeling this way. And we're not the only ones that doubt ourselves or wonder or have these thoughts that, I don't know if I'm just quite good enough, or do I really fit in? Am I faking it? And I wanted to give the reader an opportunity to watch somebody stumble through it, make mistakes, try to get back up, and give the reader the space that they could do that too in their own lives and still be proud of who they are and where they've been and what they've learned. Because I think so often that idea of failing is a negative, and it's not. I mean, we practice sports to get better, and that's acceptable. And we practice, playing an instrument to get better. But when do you practice life? You kind of are practicing all the time as things change and you grow. And so I really wanted to hit home on that idea of you are perfect just as you are. And regardless of choices you've made, good or bad, it's shaping you and you're learning. And I really wanted to spend time so the reader could reflect on how beautiful they are too, despite whatever they're carrying that makes them think otherwise.
And what an important message that is. I mean, too often we are kind of thrown from high school into college and then out, and then we're like, okay, now what do I do? Who am I? What does it even mean to, be the person I am? Am I defined by my job or my travel, or, what am I really defined by? And it's really that period of self-discovery that helps people go, you know what? And I love how you put that you can be okay with making mistakes, because a lot of times we kind of beat ourselves up about those.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we're always our toughest critic, and somewhere we develop a bar in our minds, a benchmark, and that's what we have to be. And it comes from, societal influences, parents, friends. But we have this image that we then think we must live up to, and it's totally fabricated in our own minds. And then we really are harsh on ourselves when we feel like we're not meeting that standard.
Well, it gives us a lot to think about. And then you also talk, self-love is a big portion of your book as well. And I adored that. I thought, gosh, we really need to have this topic more, because how often are we kind of beating ourselves up, not giving ourselves the time to take breaks, take vacations, explore, and be adventurous?
Yeah, I think, like you said, sometimes you get out of, we're taught to be in a system, right? A school system, however long you stay in it. And then you get out of it and you're supposed to, quote unquote, supposed to do certain things like get a job. And then, you create that schedule for yourself. And I don't know why it is that we don't say, you know what, and some people do, let's explore Europe for a month. Let's just see how I am putting myself in a scene or a scenario where I don't know what I'm doing, so that I can learn, wow, I'm great at this, not so good at that. And I think that we're in such a rush to get it right. And whether it's to achieve that title or to get a job with that company, that we kind of forget the whole, the idea that life is a journey. It sounds like a great poster on a wall, but truly, what are we rushing to do? Then we miss the now. And in the now is where you can really discover, how do you handle this? How do you respond to that? Who are you? And what are the values that you stand for? And I just, I'm really excited for people to give themselves a moment, whether it's while reading this book, or maybe they set aside some time in their lives to decide to really nurture themselves. I think too, just from a woman's perspective, sometimes we're so anxious to care for all those around us that we can forget that we have to care for ourselves first. Because if we're not if we're not whole, we can't go and help make somebody else whole. So that's something important that I wanted us to really, us as a readership, to spend some time with and to understand.
Yeah, I think your book really gives women permission, and everyone permission, to be okay with where they're at in life, because that's so true. I mean, we're always kind of rushing to be the top at a job or what have you. And then we get there and it's like, okay, now what? That level of fulfillment's not there. It's like, okay, I've got all the accolades, done the good job. Now what?
Right. Exactly. And I think human beings are amazing, amazing creatures. We have so much depth and so much ability and so much potential. And if we don't give ourselves the permission to sit and understand that, to try something totally off the wall, to do something that sounds quote unquote crazy, it's just, I feel like it's not living a full, beautiful life that each of us were created to live.
Yeah. I love where you draw your inspiration from. And we were talking about this just a little bit ago before we started our discussion here. I mean, John C. Maxwell, Brene Brown. I mean, you've got
Yes.
a list of really people who inspire, And so when you were writing this book, were you drawing pieces from your experiences and the way you felt as a reader and a writer with the information that you received from all of these, these great luminaries?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. I think the character Izzy really was inspired by the character in Jennifer Cruzy's book, Bet Me. It was probably the first novel I'd ever picked up where the character was like somebody I could relate to, a regular girl feeling regular, normal things, and just trying to figure out life. And I just thought it was so freeing to be able to say, like, see, it's okay. I'm okay. She's okay. That character. And so that's where Izzy was really inspired from. But both John Maxwell and Brene Brown deliver such incredible messages, both about how important it is to develop yourself. John Maxwell is the champion of reflection. I love that he says experience isn't the best teacher. It's evaluated experience that's the best teacher. You can go through something and just move on to the next thing. There's not as much lesson to be learned. But if you give yourself that time to reflect on what just happened, what you just went through, then you can give yourself a space in which to learn and grow. And I love that. And that's what I wanted to bring into this book, was that space where you watch Izzy and you're like, oh my gosh, that was a huge mistake. But then taking the time to say, okay, look, she's getting back up. I've made mistakes too. And how have I handled those? And then Brene Brown's work, oh my goodness, just about her research and all that she's done to really help us put language around the idea of shame, and what it looks like to be brave. It's not just jumping out of airplanes or, adventure seekers. It's standing there telling somebody vulnerably how you're feeling, not having a clue how that person's going to react. That's brave. And that's the other part of what I really wanted to bring into this novel and to Izzy's experiences, are those moments where she lets down any guard and has to let go of any image standards and just say, this is me, raw and open and confused. This is it. You get what you see. And I think a lot of times we don't give ourselves that opportunity, and we're playing roles in areas of our life that don't allow us always to be that genuine core of who we are. Of course, you can't, there's a time and place for all things, but that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, if you're someone different at home than you are at work, than you are when you're with your parents, than you are with this certain group of friends, why is that? Why aren't you the same genuine, wholehearted person all the time? And those I've read all of Brené's books, so many of John's books. He's got so many; it's hard to get them all. But really felt like those messages combined have really shaped me and my love for myself and the grace and patience for myself. And I really wanted to share that with others, so that they could have that in their lives too.
Well, why don't you share a little bit about your book with our readers? We're not going to go into it too much because, of course, it's a novel, but it covers so many things. Why don't you share just a little bit with us about the storyline?
Sure. So Izzy is a girl from Texas, and she has a moment where she sort of looks around at what her life is doing in Texas and thinks, this isn't what I wanted. This is a mess. She has an opportunity to take a job in Mexico, And she does despite, people's opinions and other people's fears. She bravely decides on her own. And it's one of the first times she really makes a decision for her life that is truly hers. So we watch her struggle a little bit with her mom, with her relationships. She gets to Mexico and it's rough. It's rough for her at first. She is the only American on the team that she's working with at a resort that's being built. And they're all, everything's in Spanish, and she speaks Spanish, but wow, all day long in meetings, that's a whole nother world. And then we watch her really work through building relationships in a completely different culture, in a foreign place. Nobody knows her. She kind of gets to start over in her mind. And then as we watch her go along, some of the same things start to plague her. And, she really has some moments where she has to look herself in the mirror and say, what's the common denominator here? Well, why does this keep happening? And she's got some amazing friends that she meets that really help her to pull out the greatness that's in her that she's never really seen herself. But it's a really funny story. We're walking alongside her and watching her go through things and her inner dialogue. And she's funny. She can be hard to tolerate sometimes. She definitely exposes us to some of those feelings that we might not outwardly admit that we're having, feelings and thoughts, whether it's about, the different cultures, whether it's about her ability at work and doubting herself, decisions when it comes to, friends versus boys, how she's feeling when she thinks she's being judged by her mom, all sorts of things that we maybe don't consider and stop and really talk about. But it's a great read. It's a great beach read. It reads really easily. There's some Spanish in here. So we translated, of course, so you can understand what's going on. But to give it that real authentic feel of her being in Mexico, I wanted to bring that language to life as well, which is what I did even just in the title with the word El Mareo.
Well, you did a beautiful job writing this book. I mean, there are so many things that really stuck out of my mind, and one is you really kind of address like relationships. And Izzy moves from a place where she has surface level kind of friends. And I think we all either have that or have been through that. And then she moves to a place where she's having like a deeper connection with people. And it's a beautiful thing to watch and to read.
Definitely. Yeah. I wanted to say too that we watch her go from surface level because she is. I don't want to say she's playing a game, but she's playing a role of who she thinks she is, and then going through some of these experiences gives her the opportunity to be vulnerable, to be honest with herself first. And then that gives her the opportunity to be honest with others around her. And it really is, I truly believe that in order to really love other people, have genuine, deep relationships with other people, you have to know and love yourself, mistakes and all, whatever you've gone through, to appreciate who you are and what you've gone through. Then you can appreciate somebody else's struggles. And that relationship then dives to such a deeper connection than just a convenient, we hang out in the same circles or we work in the same office. But to truly be able to take off the armor and be with somebody else is just such a beautiful thing that I think sometimes is missed in the rush of life and in the goals to be whatever it is that in your head you think you're supposed to be.
Well, you also have characters that Izzy wants to they have characters that she wants to emulate. So we look at like one person is really super confident. Was that people that actually you came across during your journey that you were like, wow, these people are great, or just things that you realize, gosh, I need to develop this and I'm looking to further develop this within myself?
It definitely is a little bit of both. I think when I was going through the experience myself, it was something I realized that I admired externally because I felt like I lacked it internally. And I got curious, to use a term that Brene Brown uses, is I got curious. Why is it that this person seems so effortless, and they're not conceited, but you can tell they're comfortable with who they are and how they carry themselves. And I want to be like that. How do you get that? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was definitely something that I did experience, and am so grateful that I took the time to get curious and to understand versus write it off as, something I didn't need, or, try to tear it down in that other person because I didn't have it. And I think sometimes we tend to do that. We see something in another that we would like to have. And instead of trying to understand, how can I have that? What is it that gives them that? It's easier to say, oh, well, it's not that great anyway. Oh, she's not confident. She's arrogant. I don't want to be like that. And we don't give ourselves that opportunity to grow.
Well, your book really does help people look at personal growth in such a unique way. And I love how it follows your own journey, because it's really the journey we all take when we look at, self-image and self-love and confidence and, being adventurous and, and kind of blazing your own trail. I mean, you do it all so well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, it definitely I can't write about it if I haven't walked through it and then looked back and went, what just happened there? It doesn't have to be something as grandiose as taking a job in a foreign country. It could be, I'm going to go take that workout class, or I'm going to try something totally different that I've never tried before. Maybe it's just even a new restaurant, getting yourself out of the regular routine in any way can be scary. And you can have these types of growth experiences and time to reflect without having to, pick up and move to another place. But a lot of us too, with the way that the world is so connected, the opportunity to move, even just to a new city, even just to move out of the neighborhood you grew up in. And sometimes it's, going off to college is that first little step or a little taste. And then from there, that first job in that first city in that impressionable early 20-something age, all those times, it's all opportunity for growth and reflection. And, so I'm excited that this will open people's minds and hearts to themselves, so that they might start to seek these types of small opportunities where they can as well.
While all being wrapped in a mesmerizing read, So.
Well, yes, yeah, it's in a beautiful setting. The descriptions of the place and the smells, and the breeze lifting her hair off her shoulders. It really just puts the reader in that destination. And there's just something in my heart that's romantic and beautiful about a beach in Mexico. So it's a beautiful summer read for sure, as everybody hopefully is taking time to travel and enjoy friends and family in beautiful places.
Well, I would agree with you there. And, one last question here. What would you like our readers and our listeners to take away from your book?
Oh, I would love if anyone who reads this book would take a moment to find themselves within these pages, and to love themselves for what it is that they find, whether it's a relationship that they can say, yeah, I've been through something like that, or I've felt that way before. To know that there's so many other people that are feeling that and going through something similar. I would love for the readers to take away that just a little bit more appreciation and love for themselves, and a little bit more grace, for themselves, versus always beating yourself up thinking you have to get it right the first time.
Well, what a beautiful note to end our discussion on. Danielle, where can people connect with you and be part of your community?
You can definitely find me at danielleledezma.com. And then I'm also on Facebook and would love to hear from you and would love to interact with you. Message me. If you go to my website, you can email me, and I would love to have personal conversations with anybody out there who would like to connect and just dig a little deeper.
Well, Danielle, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much, Danielle. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Izzy and El Mareo. Feel free to visit her website at danielleledezma.com for more information. Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
There are nearly 2 million Americans living with amputation. Many live right here in San Antonio. Becoming an amputee can be scary, frustrating, isolating, but there's no reason to feel alone. The San Antonio Amputee Foundation is here to help support you and guide you toward resources such as home and car modifications and even prosthetic limbs. For more information or to make a donation, visit saamputee.org. We'll help you live a full, active life, one step at a time. San Antonio Amputee Foundation, healing limbs, hearts, and souls.
If not me, then who? This ethos is driving the Travis Manion Foundation to empower veterans and families of fallen heroes to develop character in future generations. In 2007, Marine First Lieutenant Travis Manion was killed in Iraq while saving his wounded teammates. Travis's legacy lives on in the 5 words he spoke before leaving for his final deployment. If not me, then who? Guided by this mantra, veterans continue their service, developing strong relationships in the community, and thrive in their post-military lives. Visit TravisManion.org and ensure the character of our nation's heroes lives on in the next generation. If not me, then who?
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with our next special guest, Jack Woodville London, and he's here today to share with us his new book in the French Letters series, Children of a Good War. Now, Jack is a writer, historian, and author of the year for the Military Writers Society of America, and he studied the craft of fiction at the Academy of Fiction in France and Oxford University. His novels are praised for their meticulous historical research and the ability to capture the language, attitudes, and moral culture. So let's welcome to the show, Jack Woodville London.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
Well, what an honor it is to have you here. My goodness, you're such a distinguished writer. Well, so why don't you share with us what inspired you to write this book?
Quickly, the book is about the baby boom generation and how the United States has become such a divided nation. And the gist of it is that it is the story of two brothers who absolutely despise each other. They're baby boomers born shortly after World War II, and neither of them has the least idea of what their parents went through. They also don't have the least idea of who their parents' enemies are, who their real friends are, or what their secrets are. They instead grow up just sort of enjoying the prosperity, entitlement, and the absent-mindedness of the baby boom generation. The inspiration probably went back to a couple of things. I can remember as a very young boy listening to the Kingston Trio singing "Where Have All the Flowers Gone?" I can remember the day before I reported for active duty, walking in a peace march down Congress Avenue in Austin, Texas. And I can remember discovering the absolute shock of writing an article about Gold Star mothers who were sent to France in the 1930s to visit the graves of their sons who had died in World War I, and discovering that my grandmother was one of them, that I had an uncle that I had never met, had never even heard about, who was killed within 10 minutes of his first day of battle in France in 1918. And so all of these conflicted feelings led me to believe that we needed to pay more attention to our past, to take less for granted our good fortune in the present, and to discover whether we probably ought to spend more time caring about one another than looking for ways to be mean to one another.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, and I think most people don't even understand or know that we have a cemetery of our soldiers in Europe.
That's a tragedy. We actually have 6 World War I cemeteries in France and Belgium alone, in addition to several very large World War II cemeteries in France, England, and in Italy. And we also don't understand, or certainly don't remember, that the largest battle the United States ever had was in 1918 in France in World War I. Almost 2 million young soldiers were shipped to France and participated in a battle that was in an area the size of the Washington, Annapolis, Baltimore triangle, that we had about 127,000 men die in that war, and half of them died within the last few weeks, all in that one surge to try to end World War I. The largest American cemetery in Europe is the American Cemetery in eastern France, named after the Meuse-Argonne battle.
Have you always had a very strong interest in history, even as a child?
I have. I went to a very small school in a very small town. My town had about 600 people in it. I went to all 12 grades in one building. And somewhere in that building, there was a library that had a book that was full of pictures of England. And I remember looking at Anne Hathaway's cottage when I was in the 3rd or 4th grade, thinking there are not a lot of trees and cottages in Groom, Texas, and there must be a bigger world out there. And as I went through school and discovered that not only was there a bigger world, but there was a world with men who crossed oceans, women who sewed flags, people who explored and developed and gained scientific experiments. It all just seemed fascinating. And so I studied history in undergraduate school and have kept an interest in history my entire life. I have several historical articles that have been published, I'm happy to say. And my novels tend to rotate around historical events with real people.
Oh, it's so interesting because I know this book is part of the French Letters series. And so, as you're continuing this series, how much research did you do for Children of a Good War?
I'm reluctant to use the word an immense amount of research because it sounds self-congratulatory, and that's just simply not the case. But the story involves historical waypoints, both from the mid-1980s and from World War II. And so the research I had to do involved the ability to reconstruct a military court-martial in France in the World War II setting, and also to reconstruct where the Army would keep those records in the 1980s. I had to reconstruct how DNA was first used in the 1980s to determine paternity, and how railroad schedules operated, how nursing homes in France were conducted, things of that sort. And so one of the happiest moments of my interview career was when a fellow asked me how long I had lived in Saint-Lô, France. And I told him I'd never lived in Saint-Lô. He said that he had been so taken with the immensity or the intensity of the details that he had actually gone to the public records office for that department in France, the Calvados, and looked for the marriage and death records of my characters, only to discover that they were just people I had made up.
That's a really high compliment coming from somebody who's actually going there and doing that research, you know?
Oh, he actually lived there. He was a radio host in Rennes, R-E-N-N-E-S, Rennes, France.
Oh, my goodness.
And when he interviewed me, he wanted to find out what happened to the people.
Did you draw a lot of your own personal story, your own family discovery, and interweave it within this book?
Well, I think most writers write what they know, and I certainly know my family as well as any other of the folks. But the short answer is not really. I drew more on people that I had known at every stage of my life, whether it was in undergraduate school, whether it was in the Army. It even involves little snippets of characters who I first met when I was in writing school in France. Military officers that I had met who I utterly despised, and one or two I absolutely admired. Judges before whom I practiced, that sort of thing. Those who would draw my family structure into the book would probably be disappointed to learn it's not us.
Well, I think in many ways it could be everyone's story, especially when we look at our military. You know, how many of our soldiers are still in Europe, and just that cemetery that most people don't know about. I think it needs to be really kind of put on the map.
I would be honored if people would learn that when you are flying to Europe, it's only a 15-minute drive from somewhere you probably will be to go to an American military cemetery and look at the rows and the rows of the crosses and the stars of David and read the names of the missing on those walls. And just remember, we had to give up a tremendous amount of sacrifice to be where we are. And we should not take that for granted. Every man and woman in those graves was a loss to someone's family, was a loss to us as a whole, and set an example for courage, bravery, and a commitment that seems to me to be kind of hard to find today.
I understand you took a trip to France and you spent some time at that cemetery.
The Meuse-Argonne Cemetery is about 125 miles east of Paris, almost at the border of France, Luxembourg, and Germany. There are 14,600 men and women buried in that cemetery, and almost every one of them died in the last 2 weeks to a month of that battle. The 100th centenary, the 100th anniversary, I should say, of the end of World War I occurred at 11 o'clock in the morning on November the 11th, 2018. And I was honored to be invited to be a part of the memorial program in that cemetery on that morning. The Military Writers Society of America invited me to identify men and women who current members had in their families who were buried in the cemetery. And we went throughout the cemetery putting American flags, and in some cases, flags from their states, on their graves. And then at 11 in the morning, we spoke about the honors that those men had earned and those women had gathered to be buried there. About 2 in the afternoon, we were still finishing up our work out in the cemetery when the cemetery director came to me and said that we should not expect the president that day. And I didn't know we would ever expect the president. I think he was joking. But he went on to say that all of the cemeteries in France had been given messages by the embassy that the president would not be attending any of the American cemeteries in France that day because it was raining. We went on in the rain and put more flags and worked until our work was done.
Well, thank you for doing that. And of course, thank you for your service to our country. I mean, it just hearing what you did, it impacts me. I can only imagine the impact it had on your soul.
It's almost impossible to imagine the feelings that come over you when you look at the endless rows and the endless files of those graves, the uniformity of the crosses and the stars and the beautiful surroundings that are in those French countrysides, and to realize that that countryside was so devastated by that war that it couldn't even grow crops until almost 1930. And today they're still unearthing buried mines, grenades, bombs, and every now and then someone gets blown up out in their fields, and you realize this was the way the world lived for 4 years in a battle that was almost 400 miles long, 100 miles wide, and trenches from Switzerland all the way to the English Channel. And we were a part of it. One of the greatest books of that war was the wartime diary of Antonio Sáenz, S-A-E-N-Z, a young Mexican-American from San Antonio, who volunteered because he wanted the world to know that Mexican-American soldiers were every bit as brave as white soldiers at a time when there was terrible, terrible discrimination. He was the Spanish-speaking man in his unit who would translate for the other Spanish-American boys who were in the trench. And one morning they were ordered to go over the top. And he turned, and all 3 of them spoke in Spanish, saying they were about to go over the top to fight for freedoms in Europe that they themselves really did not enjoy back in the United States. And finally, it registered on me. These are not just abstract ideas of freedom and combat and heroism. These are real people who live in a real world and have real world consequences to the things they're doing, whether it's in the trenches or whether it's their parents back home.
That would impact anybody really making that connection. They're not just characters on a page. It's a reality that happened. And I think your book really brings awareness to people, knowing that we've got these cemeteries there, and that our soldiers, fought bravely, and we lost many of them.
The book, to the extent that it goes into the cemetery, is in the more familiar cemetery from the Normandy D-Day landings. And it involves this sad scene where a young man is trying to follow his father's footsteps and understand where he was in the war and what he did. And this young man, Frank, himself a veteran of the Vietnam War, like so many of us, had taken it for granted that his father had gone to war and his father had come back from war, and that's all there was to it. And as he stands on the beach and climbs the hill and goes into the cemetery, it registers on him that in Vietnam he had had many of the same experiences that his father had had in Europe. And it wasn't just the experiences of climbing the hill and storming the enemy. These are the experiences of getting drunk with your buddies, looking for women, hating your officers, being terrified of the next 5 minutes, and being ordered to do things that no one in their right mind would ever do willingly, yet going on to do them. And he did all of this because he had to find out not just who his father was and maybe who his mother was, but who he himself was. And none of us ever really knows who we are until we're called on to prove it.
That is 100% true. I mean, we look at it and we never know the mettle of our character until it's been tested.
Well, we stopped having the test, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. I entered the Army not because I had these visions of heroism, but because I was drafted, as so many of us were. I converted it into becoming an officer because I thought it would be safer, and that was stupid. But we really don't have an obligation to provide public service anymore. And I think whether I wanted to or did not want to go into the Army, the fact is, once I was in, I felt like I had a stake in the country. And I question whether all of us have that same sense anymore, that we have a personal stake in the well-being of how our country runs. It's one thing to simply say, I'm going to go vote. It's another thing to say, I'm willing to sign the contract that I'll be responsible for come what may, even if it means getting killed. We want things to go well. We want good leaders.
Yeah, that's so important. You shared with me before we started this lovely discussion that your book was just given a gold medal award, and I'd love for you to share a little bit about that with us.
Well, I'm almost caught off guard. The publicist for the publisher submitted Children of the Good War to a number of different award committees, and out of the blue, I was just notified that it won the gold medal, the best book of the year 2018 in the war and military historical fiction category. It's an incredible honor. I'm just so flabbergasted to have been the winner of that award, but especially so because it's essentially an anti-war book. No one can find good things that come out of wars other than buried bombs that tend to go off and injure everyone right then or as long as decades later. In this case, 40 years after World War II. So, wow, to have won that award, I'm just flattered and grateful to my entire team who not only watched me write the book, but helped edit it, correct it, revise it, publicize it, publish it, and get the word out. I'm a very lucky man indeed.
Well, congratulations on your award, and why it might seem like it's a little, it's an interesting because of your book being an anti-war book. You do have so much history in this historical, being a historical novel that it really lends people, they feel like they were actually there, like, that host that you were talking about earlier.
Well, thank you. The book is the third book in a trilogy called the French Letters series. And the first two books in the series take place during World War II. Children of the Good War, this book, is about the children of those people who fought and who lived at home and carried the banner on the home front in World War II, and who simply have no idea what their parents went through, either in combat or in small-town America trying to keep things together as the war went on and all of their men disappeared. So they're all three tragic anti-war stories, but they're really stories that could have been your family, my family, you, me, any of us who had brothers, sisters, parents, grandparents in that war or in the Vietnam War. We never seem to learn.
Yeah, I mean, I've had family that have served in the military. I know quite a few people who have as well, and of course, we're eternally grateful for everything that you and they do in order to keep our country safe and keep us safe. And so that's much appreciated. I know also that you work with veterans and teach writing. I'd love for you to share a little bit about that with us.
Well, it's just a phenomenal thing. Almost every person who serves comes back to the United States with a story. It may not be a story they want to tell the world. It might be a novel. It could be absolutely life-changing. It could be nonfiction history of the account of a battle they were in. But more often than not, it's a story they want to tell themselves to get some things off their chest and get some freedom from the memories that they have with them. And most of them have never had any training in creative writing. And so several years ago, the Military Writers Society of America decided that we would go out and start holding creative writing sessions for the men and women who have been in the military or are in the military and who want to have an opportunity to put their memories and their stories down in the form of a book or a memoir. So we go to these VA centers several times a year and host workshops. And the workshops are essentially the devices and conventions of creative writing. The basics are how to identify a conflict, how to structure a story so that you have a story arc, the development of character. Occasionally we work on the idea of how to present dialogue that sounds like real people talking about real things. We talk about setting. All of the things that are just sort of fundamentals that readers take for granted, but which require a little bit of training, experience, and work in order to make them come apart as a book. I've been the leader of these VA programs for 5 years now, 6 years now, and we have several more scheduled this year, one in Albuquerque, one in Austin, Texas, others. You cannot imagine how gratifying it is to go to these workshops and watch these men and women set to trying to develop the ability to tell their stories. It's absolutely rewarding.
Man, that must be so just empowering for them. I hear you say rewarding. I'm sure it's just so heartfelt to be there and be a part of that. If for our veteran listeners that are out there and they'd like to participate, how do they get involved?
The easiest way is to go to your VA center, hospital, or other center where your VA has a social event, and to tell them that you'd like to have a writing workshop. Almost all of the VAs have a coordinator who is in charge of vocational rehabilitation or other rehabilitation, and they run these workshops to the VA vocational rehab centers. It doesn't mean you have to be impaired. It just means you have to be a veteran. Anyone can go. These are not closed to veterans, and we do from time to time have workshops for everyone. I'm co-host of an event in Albuquerque, New Mexico in September that is absolutely open to the entire world to come and just learn about the devices and conventions of writing, publishing, marketing, that sort of thing. You can get in touch with the Military Writers Society of America. Just type those words into your browser and it'll pop right up. You can send me an email, jack@jackwlondon.com. Or you can just go to Albuquerque and head for the hotel. It'll be a great event. The reward, though, is really in watching the veterans who feel empowered about the ability to put down on paper or organize in their computers the things they just want to talk about and don't know how to tell.
Oh, and gosh, what a great service you're doing to be helping them get to that place where they can write their story. In many ways, maybe it's a way of just getting it out and they just write it for themselves, or maybe it's something they, choose to later on write a book about.
Most of these do not become published books. Many of them become personal memoirs that these men and women write for themselves and for their families and for their children. It is a win for me just to see their joy in turning sentences into paragraphs, paragraphs into chapters, and chapters into books. It's a win for them because they're very proud of the ability to tackle something that they've never tried before and to move on with it. So I think everyone is gratified and happy from these workshops and that experience. I'm a winner in this. It's not like I do it for free, so it's not like I'm getting any gratification from the paycheck. It's absolutely gratifying from watching the men and women enjoy what they're doing and take ownership of it.
Yeah. My goodness, Jack, we could talk all day. You're such just an amazing person, so gifted as a writer. Where can our listeners, I know you said it once already, but where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
I have a website, as does everyone else on the entire planet. Mine is very simple, jwlbooks.com. Or you can get in touch with me at jack@jackwlondon.com. I really do answer my email.
Well, you got to love that, an author that you can get directly in touch with. Jack, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, how kind of you to invite me. This is absolutely a pleasure, and I've enjoyed the last half hour.
Well, thank you, Jack. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book in the French Letter series, Children of a Good War. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.